king of the uplanders. Deeper and deeper the two travelers penetrated into the grim forest. Except for the twitter of birds and the occasional creaking of a branch, as some animal made its way through the underbrush, there was no sound. Almost holding his breath, Philidor trotted after the old medicine man, peering nervously to the right and left and half expecting a bear or wallopus to spring out of some hollow tree. But as time passed and no wild beasts of any nature did appear, he began to breathe easier and to look around with real interest and delight. The huge gnarled trees were tinged with purple. Wild grape and wisteria vines climbed in riotous profusion up the trunks and out over the limbs, lacing them together and forming fairy-like arbors and leafy lanes. The floor of the forest was thickly strewn with violets and the fragrance of lavender was everywhere. Herbie, being a native Gillican, was accustomed to the grandeur of the forest and pattered along in a businesslike manner, giving no attention to the purple pansies, clustered around the great trees, nor the lordly flags, edging each forest stream. "I've heard that the Emerald City is but a day's journey from Mombai's hut," he called over his shoulder, "and with this thinking cap to guide us we'll be there for dinner. Then Ozma can magically transport us to the Osier Isles and save your father's kingdom. I trust the Wizard of Oz will give me an audience," he added hopefully. "I'd like to show him my medicine chest and tell him my story." "But I wonder what did become of Tattypoo," mused Philidor, stopping to admire some especially lovely pansies. "Do you suppose we shall ever find out?" "Of course. Of course. With Ozma's famous picture and the wizard's magic we shall discover everything." Waving his arms happily, Herbie quickened his steps. As for Philidor, the more he thought about the capital of Oz, the more impatient he became to reach his journey's end. Herbie had taken off the thinking cap, and was marching along briskly, the boxes and bottles in his medicine chest rattling and tinkling and his wispy white hair snapping in the morning breeze. The trees were farther apart now, and presently they stepped out of the forest altogether. But only to find themselves on the brink of a rushing torrent. "Now what?" muttered the medicine man gloomily, and while Philidor gazed anxiously up and down the bank, he hurriedly opened the chest. "What are you doing?" asked the boy curiously, as Herbie poured several pills from a small bottle into his palm. "Keeping myself from getting cross," puffed the medicine man, quickly swallowing the pills. "Have some?" "But we want to get cross this river," chuckled the little prince, laughing in spite of himself. "Well, I don't see how we are to do it, Phil." Mournfully the little man returned the pill bottle to his chest and slammed the doors. "That's what was making me cross, and I never allow myself to feel cross," he finished placidly. "Surely there is some way over." Sitting down on a log, Philidor stared thoughtfully at the ground. Both had forgotten the thinking cap, which would doubtless have solved the problem in a second. As it was, they wasted nearly 10 minutes wondering what to do and would probably have been sitting there yet, had not a sudden rattle from the witch's basket attracted their attention. Peeping in to see whether a squirrel had gotten into the sandwiches, Phil was surprised to see the jumping rope knocking its handles sharply together. "Hurrah!" shouted the medicine man. "Tattypoo is helping us." "Take the rope, Phil, and see what happens." Rather uncertainly Philidor picked up the rope. Nothing happened at first, then Phil began to revolve it as he had seen the little girls on the Osier Isles do. At the second skip he flew lightly over the raging river. Herbie shouted and waved from the other side, so he gaily skipped back. "It's a good thing I took those pills," cried Herbie, shaking his finger at Phil, "otherwise I should have been very cross when you skipped across the river and left me." At Philidor's suggestion they each took an end of the rope, then both skipping together jumped the river at one bound. "I'm glad we brought this, aren't you?" Beaming with satisfaction and pleasure, Philidor rolled up the marvelous jumping rope and put it back in the basket. The medicine man, again bethinking himself of the witch's cap and to be sure they were still going in the right direction, put it gravely on his head. "The way lies over those mountains," he observed after a short pause. A quick walk through some fields brought them to the foot of the first mountain and, undaunted by its height and cragginess, they began to ascend, pulling themselves upward with the help of small saplings and bushes. The mountain's side was covered with heather so that it was as purple as the witch's forest. Halfway up, there was a small plateau and, weary from their stiff climb, the two adventurers stopped to rest. "Phew," puffed the little prince, taking off his crown and looking ruefully at a long rent in his blue cloak. "I hope there are not many more mountains like this one." "There aren't." The answer was so loud and emphatic Philidor jumped nearly a foot, and Herbie, after one astonished glance at the speaker, threw open his chest and began rummaging wildly among its contents. "What's he doing?" asked the stranger, as Herbie clapped a dozen lozenges into his mouth. "Taking his medicine. It's just a habit he has," answered the little prince, eyeing the newcomer apologetically. "I was taking a laugh lozenge, if you must know," announced the medicine man, slamming his chest. "A laugh lozenge," roared the huge mountaineer, leaning over to get a better look at the little man. "Why, what for?" "To keep from laughing at you," explained Herbie calmly. "Give me one. Give me two, give me a dozen before I die." Rocking backward and forward, the great stranger howled so long and so heartily that Philidor began to pound him on the back, but Herbie, waiting his chance, popped 6 lozenges into his mouth. Instantly he stopped laughing. "That's funny," he mused uneasily. "I still feel like laughing at you, but I can't." "Same here." Slapping his medicine chest, Herbie strutted up and down. "They're one of my best cures," he boasted proudly. "You've heard of cough drops to keep one from coughing. Well, laugh lozenges keep you from laughing at the wrong time. Have another," he invited generously. "No thanks." The big man shook his head in a puzzled manner and turned to the little prince. "How do you happen to be climbing my mountain?" he inquired politely. "Because it wouldn't climb itself," answered Philidor boldly. His answer tickled the mountaineer so tremendously he burst into a loud roar. "Ho! Ho! So it can't," he shouted, "and you've saved my laugh, boy. I was afraid I was cured for life." "Those laugh lozenges will only keep you from laughing at me," explained Herbie hastily. "Oh," wheezed the stranger with a relieved chuckle, "that's all right then. I can stand not laughing at you, but I must laugh with you. It's the only thing I really do well," and to prove it he began to laugh so merrily that Philidor and Herbie could not help from joining in. Every time Philidor tried to stop, another look at the mountaineer would set him off again. To begin with, the fellow was 6 feet tall and dressed in purple velvet kilts like a Highlander. Then, his toes curled up almost to his knees, his nose curled up, so did his eyebrows and the corners of his mouth, while his hair grew straight on end and waved to and fro. Indeed, a more comical and curious countenance the little prince had never gazed upon in his life. Explain yourselves," choked the mountaineer at last. "I'm on a vacation, but what are you on?" "Vacation," exclaimed Philidor, wiping his eyes and taking a long look at a huge axe the mountaineer carried over one shoulder, for he had quite evidently been chopping wood. "You're joking." "Joe King." "Why, of course I'm Joe King, but how did you guess?" Regarding the little boy with twinkling eyes he continued, "I'm joking all the time. That's my name, you see, and that," he waved up toward the mountain top, "that is my kingdom. I am king of the uplanders, but I was tired of kinging it, so came down here to work and have a little fun." "Do you think work is fun?" asked Herbie seriously. "Well, it is for a king," admitted the mountain monarch frankly, Takes the kinks out of kinging. You look like a royal person your own self, he observed, eyeing Philidor with sudden attention. I see you are wearing a crown. He's a prince, confided Herbie mysteriously, and unless we reach the Emerald City tonight, his kingdom will be utterly destroyed by a monster. Then he can have half of mine, offered Joe King promptly. Philidor could not help smiling at this generous offer. If you would just show us the quickest way over the mountains, he began eagerly, it would help us a lot. You see, my father is back on the Osier Isles, and he is more important than I am. Then there's my mother. Tell me all, commanded Joe, sitting down on a tree stump and drawing Phil to his side. So Philidor related the whole of his strange story and even told how the medicine man had been released from Mombai's enchantment. When he had finished, the king slapped his thigh and sprang briskly to his feet. I'll help you, he declared promptly, and began high-and-G so sonorously that Philidor had to put both hands to his ears and Herbie dodged behind a tree to keep out of the draft. Ho! Ho! Where are you? Hi! Hi! Come back here, you rascal! Hi, boy! Ho! Boy, I say hi, boy! Whom are you calling? Faltered the little prince, removing one hand from his ear. My horse, panted the king, beginning to stamp, whistle and clap his hands. And presently there was a clash, clatter and scrape, and down the mountain slid the strangest steed Phil or the medicine man had ever beheld. It was, to be perfectly frank with you, a giant horse. And as you have doubtless never seen a giant horse, I'd better describe him at once. He was, to begin with, twice as large as an ordinary horse and of a shiny purple. His eyes were red and roguish, his mane white and flowing, while his tail was an umbrella. Yes, it really was. But it was his legs that were most remarkable. Highboy had telescope legs, capable of stretching up or down. When he slid into view, the front two were short and the hind two were long, so that he had the appearance of a kangaroo. A thistle bush hung loosely from the corner of his mouth, and he seemed quite annoyed at being disturbed. What's up? He snorted, rolling his eyes from one to another. As they finally rested on the medicine man, he began to chew up the thistle bush with great rapidity. Then, throwing back his head, he began to laugh as only a high horse can. Better give him a laugh lozenge, muttered His Majesty, winking at Philidor, and Herbie, who really did not like being laughed at, tiptoed forward and slipped several lozenges down Highboy's throat. I cannot help looking funny, he explained with great dignity. I'm made from a funny mixture. Ha! Ha! Sniffed the giant horse, opening one eye. I should say you are. That open front chest. That cap. He. You're enough to make a horse laugh and a stone lion roar. Ho! Ho! Ha! Ha! There, cautioned the king. We all have our peculiarities. Herbie's a medicine man and just full of harmless remedies. There now, that will do. It will have to do, coughed the giant horse. I can't ha another ha. Herbie and Phil exchanged a satisfied little nod at this, and the king, taking Highboy by the forelock, introduced him to the travelers. Highboy, this is the Prince of the Osier Isles. Prince, my horse. The giant horse pulled himself up and politely thrust out his hoof, which Philidor shook with some nervousness. Next Herbie was presented and hastily munched a laugh lozenge, so he could keep a straight face during the proceedings. Highboy will carry you quickly to the capital, won't you, old fellow? Highboy nodded his head merrily and after several prances came over and stood beside the king. His legs were now all of the same length, and as Philidor wondered how they should ever mount upon his back, there came a series of clicks. The horse's legs grew shorter and shorter, till its body almost touched the ground. "Hop on," directed Joe, and, seizing his lunch basket, Philidor hastened to obey. Herbie, holding his chest with both hands, climbed up after him, and the king, mounting last of all, gave the signal to start. Then up went Highboy's legs to an unbelievable height, up snapped his umbrella tail, shading the travelers most comfortably, and next instant they were galloping over the purple mountain as fast as the west wind and the south wind, too. And riding a high horse has its advantages, let me tell you. When climbing a mountain, it keeps its front legs short and its back legs long, so that its body is always on a level. This was quite fortunate, for Herbie and Philidor had trouble enough keeping their seats, and the little medicine man was so jostled and bounced about he did nothing but groan. "My bottles will be smashed to bits," he chattered anxiously. "Do you hear them knocking about?" Philidor certainly did, but was so excited and interested in this strange steed and his merry master he could not be properly sympathetic. "Look," he cried breathlessly, "we're almost to the top, and there's a purple city and a castle high up in the clouds." "That's uptown," cried Joe King pridefully. "And a tip-top place to be, isn't it, Heidi, old boy? Take the highway up and the low way down, and when you are there, you may have the town," he roared lustily. "And here we are on my mountain top, where we have high times. Whoa! Hi, boy! Stop!" The giant horse, with a joyous neigh, did stop, for they were right at the city gates. No one came to admit them, so Highboy raised himself up and looked over the wall. "Open in the name of the law," he snorted impatiently. "The king and two strangers are without."